like to do if we weren't blocking him right now? What would Barack Obama be doing? Who is he?
Well, I think Barack Obama wants to, and at the very least, to impose a Chavez-style socialism on the United States, and to do so in a way that alters our Constitution. He has no respect for the Constitution, believes that the whole idea of limited government constrains the government from doing what the elitists think is good, and interferes with their freedom of action. And therefore, he wants to throw it out the window. They also seem to believe in what you might call a majority tyranny. So that if you win an election, you then have license to do whatever you want and no longer have to pay any attention to individual rights, to the rights of the minority groups of voters that don't support the things you're doing, all of that overthrown. The patterns are patterns that we see in contemporary life with somebody like Chavez, and they're patterns that we have seen in the past, as I've been saying, with these other socialist regimes. So none of it in that respect is surprising. And he just seems to be cut from an ideological cloth that came from his background, his association with people like Bill Ayers, his instruction in the approaches of folks like Saul Alinsky, his preference for Marxist-Leninist teachers and instructors who would, among other things, have shared with him that understanding of the world which devalues the individual and which lifts up the notion that individuals are no different than stones or rocks or any other material things, and should be arranged and ordered by the will of the ruler, so that their ideas and understanding of what is right for the society can be carried out. The whole moral understanding that puts an intrinsic value on individuals that started with our Declaration of Independence, he also rejects. And once you realize that you're dealing with somebody whose moral universe has rejected the fundamental premises of liberty that most Americans kind of take for granted, even when they can't fully articulate them, then you are a long way toward understanding what he's about. And what does he want to do? He wants to impose that kind of controlling socialist government on the United States. Does he think it's going to do us good? I imagine so, but I've got to tell you, when you see somebody so unwilling to look at the factual truth, and a lot of these leftists are and have been for the whole of my lifetime, you have to wonder whether they haven't completely surrendered to the fervor of their ideology in a way that makes their good intentions worthless, because they're not willing to discipline those intentions with the discipline of common sense and reason and truth.
Amazing points. Dealing with lying, though, you worked in the White House with Ronald Reagan, and even if you disagreed with him or loved him or hated him, Reagan didn't do a lot of lying. I mean, he really was honest, and his policies were very transparent. In fact, there wasn't any lying, as much I can tell, which is universes away from Clinton. Bush certainly did some deceptive things, but Obama, I mean, you've been around presidents, you've been an ambassador, you've been in these campaigns. Is it safe to say, or would you disagree with my perspective, that he is the greatest liar I've ever seen, a new level of lying? I mean, I've read books about Hitler. Yeah. I've read books about other people. It seems that Obama is really the slickest liar I've ever seen.
I'm not sure. I think part of the reason he appears so right now is because the mass of the American people kind of aren't used to having to assume that the person they're dealing with is, how can I put it, not just lying. They are constructing a fiction and intending that fiction to manipulate you. So in a sense, when we sit down and watch a TV show, right, we are drawn into the world. We accept the characterizations. We accept the assumptions and so forth and so on, what they call the suspension of disbelief. Now, at one level, everything we're watching is false, isn't it? Those people aren't really who they're pretending to be. Their inflections and tones do not reflect feelings they really have, and so forth and so on. And yet, because they're good at what they do, we accept it and are drawn into that world. Well, imagine that you're dealing with people for whom every aspect of public life is that kind of acted-out fiction. They're pursuing their objectives, and they just want to get you to come in and believe the world is what it needs to be so that they can achieve their power, achieve their objectives, achieve what they want to achieve. That's Barack Obama. And to say he's greatest, it's just that we're not used to having such thoroughgoing actors with no respect for truth in American politics. Yeah, we're used to liars. People lie. But underlying it all, there's been this assumption that the aim somehow is still to respect the truth. That's not the case with these folks because they don't believe it anymore. You know, the notion of the self-evident truths that establish our rights, that show clearly that justice somehow has a basis that isn't just based on the power of those who rule over you. They reject all of that. It's I think, right now very striking to us because Americans kind of have had the luxury of taking it for granted that overall this is not what American life and politics was about. But now we're having to deal with a very real fact that this way of doing politics, which overtook Europe, which overtook countries in the third world, and which radically transformed those countries into gulags and hellish places of oppression, it has now come to America.
Wow. You know what? I rarely have epiphanies these days from guests. I mean, I get a lot of good points, a lot of good ideas, but you just actually shifted my perspective. I mean, I know it's a matrix. I know it's a facade, a Wizard of Oz lie, but the way you just explained it, you're right. It's that the mainstream media and the system is playing to his tune with such choreographed precision that it creates a whole Disneyland of lies. So it's not just Bill Clinton saying I didn't have sex with that woman or lying about, corruption. It's that the whole thing's a lie.
Well, exactly. They are creating, as it were, a perceived reality that serves their purposes. And, of course, the ground started to be laid for this years ago when these people started that phony mantra, perception is reality. Perception is reality. This is not true. Not if God exists, at least, because there is a principle of reality that transcends human perception and understanding and is the basis for making real judgments in a rational way about what is right, what is wrong, what should or should not be done. They reject that notion of having such a basis for morality, and the only standard they claim is a scientific one. But of course, remember, science cannot tell us anything about what is right and what is wrong, what is just, what is unjust. Science can't address that in any way.
Sir, we've got limited time. We've got about 12 minutes left, and I'm even going to skip this network break so we have this time with you because I've got several other questions I want to get to and certainly have you back up in the near future. Very honored to have Ambassador Alan Keyes on with us today. Very thought-provoking. Especially, perception isn't reality if the person giving you the perception is putting false data in or lying or distorting. I mean, if you're wearing a headset of virtual reality goggles and you see a flat green field you're walking in, but really you're about to walk off a 100-story building, right, you're going to fall and die. The goggles are lying to you. Perception isn't reality, but that was just me backing you up there.
Think of it. This is exactly what they were trying to do with this healthcare business. Sell it on the basis of we're going to give everybody access, it's going to be better, and it's going to be less costly, and all of this. And then when you started to get into the detail, it wasn't actually less costly. They were just going to shift the distribution of the cost so that the elderly citizens and so forth were going to be targeted in particular for rationing so that those costs could be distributed differently. They said, well, everybody's going to have access and so forth, but the burden of paying for that suddenly shifted so that instead of coming out of the corporate profit, it will now come out of the taxpayer coffers. What does that mean? It means that invisibly and quietly, the working people are being made to pay for what they were not paying for in terms of the present arrangement.
And the government's got a whole new tax to pull out of your paycheck. Now we got exactly. We've got 10 minutes left here. I want to ask you quick questions now. Eugenics, from my research, Ambassador, is the foundation of these control freaks. They believe we're all just blobs of protoplasm, so why not get rid of 80% of us? United Nations Biological Diversity Assessment 96, State Department Memorandum 200, Eric Holder, all these other people, John P. Holdren, Ecoscience, population, resources, environment, calls for forced drugging the water to sterilize us, forced abortion, CPS taking basically all children, raising them in government hives. And I have all these other government textbooks, and you're a learned person, I know you're aware of this.